Outside of an obsession with cats, Monster Hunter and Persona are very different. After all, Monster Hunter World is a game that has action-based combat, progression in the game is more closely tied to your gear and skill than the story, as well as co-op being heavily tied into everything you do. While Persona 5 is a turn-based RPG that puts the progression focus on the story of the characters and keeps character strength secondary and puts you on a lone journey through the story. But what the games share that we're going to be focusing on today is the fact that both games put you into situations where you are forced to commit to choices and live with the consequences. In order to be at the same page when it comes to what I'll be calling high and low level commitments, I'll be using an example from old Mario and new Zelda. In Super Mario Bros, the level of commitment is what I'd call low. The game consisted of moving through the levels and the only commitment possible being jumping. This is because when running, you can always stop and fully control your character, but once you've jumped, you are forced to fall as well. The reason why I'm calling this a low-level commitment is not because of the possible effects of the jump, but rather the time you're going to have to live with the effects of that jump. And that effect stretches itself from the moment you jump to the moment you land, or in other words, a second or so. In contrast to that, Breath of the Wild early on gives you the task to climb up a mountain in order to get to a shrine. Climbing up to the shrine exposes you to cold weather, which you have multiple ways of facing. First possibility would be to try to climb it without protection from the cold. Second possibility being to use food in order to keep yourself warm for limited amounts of time. And the third option being to get a warm doublet and not having to care about anything. This commitment in Zelda can have a lot of different results. You can end up trying to climb the mountain and slowly realize that you might have bitten off more than you can chew as your food supplies dwindle and the thought process of backing down versus pushing through enters your mind. Or you felt like the task of climbing the mountain sounded daunting enough that you decided to not go up there until you could feel completely confident in your newly acquired clothing. Both of these choices can end up affecting minutes of your game time as you're either making the run or preparing for the run. This makes the level of commitment higher than Mario while still keeping it at a pretty low level. With levels of commitment being defined, let's move on to Monster Hunter, which is going to display a wide range of commitment. On the lower end, we see your starting loadout and the mission preparation. Whenever you're going into a mission, you start out by finding out what your mission is about, which most often boils down to what monster will I be facing. Once that's established, you get to make informed decisions on things like what items you're going to be bringing, as well as what equipment you're going to be using. Even though the length of hunts can get up to 50 minutes in length, these choices are still pretty low commitment. That's because even once the mission's started, you can go back to camp and make adjustments on these. But doing that within the space of the mission ends up costing you time, which could theoretically make you fail the mission. Canteen food acts a bit differently from items and equipment, as once you've eaten, you won't be able to eat again until a certain amount of time has passed. This puts it right between the aforementioned items and decorations. Decorations can be summarized as extra skills or stat boosts that get placed on your other equipment. The way they differ from items and food is that the only way to use them is to slot them into your equipment while you're still in your base. Once you've left for a mission, you won't be able to switch them around. That means that the level of commitment on decorations lasts for an entire mission. Having to tie yourself down for an entire mission might seem a bit daunting, but it pales in comparison to the weapon types. I've touched on equipment before, but that was in the space of selecting a weapon within the same type, as every type of weapon holds many different variations in what type of damage they can do in the form of elements or status ailments. Selecting a weapon from the same type is a completely different beast from investing in a new one. At the beginning of the game, you're given the lowest level of each weapon type in order to get an understanding of how each type functions. This allows you to make an informed decision. Giving you this option is very important because using any weapon efficiently requires a lot of time. A lot of which can be placed into learning how to use the weapon. As on a surface level, it might seem pretty basic, but once you go deeper and understand that different monsters require different approaches, as well as realizing that your proficiency with the weapon can drastically cut down on hunt times, you start to understand that there is a lot to learn. While you do that learning, you will also be upgrading your weapon. This is done by using monster drops gathered while hunting to build new weapons. At first, this might not seem like that big of a commitment though, as you're simply playing the game, but it becomes very apparent if you decide to switch weapons. The first thing to do upon switching is to start building weapons of the new type so you can have the proper elements needed in order to efficiently hunt. This often means time spent hunting monsters that are lower level in order to get pieces necessary to build the weapon of your dreams. But an even bigger deal is to learn how the new weapon works. Some of the weapons in the game require a drastically different approach, so not only do you need to learn the ins and outs of what your buttons do, but you might also have to re-evaluate your approach. Depending on your general skill level, this whole process could end up taking tens of hours. Through all of these systems, Monster Hunter provides moment-to-moment gameplay which is heavily affected by choices that you may have made minutes or a couple of hours ago. And with that, we move on to Persona 5. Much like Monster Hunter, the commitment works on multiple levels. As the game is a turn-based RPG, there is a hard start for a battle encounter. But because the game doesn't do random encounters, you always have the ability to start any battle on your terms. Before any battle, you have the opportunity to reorganize your team, heal up, and make sure each member is using the correct pieces of equipment. Because you're the one in control, you get to commit to the battles, which can range from a couple of seconds to minutes, making it the lowest level of commitment we're going to be looking at. Moving higher in commitment levels, we reach the trips to the metaverse where you as a player either go to Mementos or the target's palace. The way each trip is structured is very similar to how Monster Hunter handles missions. Both situations give you time so you can decide what equipment and items you're bringing in, but the big difference lies in the stakes of the situation. In the case of Monster Hunter, you can succeed or you can fail, and failing doesn't mean anything unless it's an investigation that has limited amount of uses. In Persona, you of course can have successes and failures, where successes can be seen as achieving the goal you set when first going into the metaverse, and failure can be dying. On top of that, there is also the possibility of not getting as far as you wanted. The whole idea of this makes what was once black and white into a grayscale. What's interesting about that grayscale is how it's intertwined with the general layout of the game. Persona's story is set to play out within a set number of days, and whenever you go into the metaverse, you use up one of those. This means that whenever you go into the metaverse and don't achieve the goal that you've set for yourself, you eat into the resource of time, which will cost you down the line. This all leads to making the commitment of going into the metaverse a heavier one than choosing to go into a mission. Which brings us to the highest level commitments you can make in Persona, the decisions you make in the regular world. In the metaverse, you can realistically experience everything about it within a single playthrough, but the real world is less forgiving than that. The way the confidants in the game work is that you gain levels by hanging out with different NPCs. These NPCs can be unavailable at any given time for whatever reason. The effects of these confidants can be huge and have a massive impact on how the entirety of your playthrough goes. And considering my original playthrough took around 88 hours, that kind of puts perspective on the level of commitment at play here. But that level of commitment is also what makes the whole thing so engaging. If we were to boil down the days in the game into a resource and translate that to money, we get to clearly see how that can affect our choices. In real life, you're working with limited amount of money, which forces you to think about whether you're going to buy something or not. But if you had infinite resources, there would be no need for thought, and any usage of that resource would lose all meaning. In everyday life, we are constantly put into situations where we are forced to make decisions. Many of them are easy and don't really matter in the long run, but some are bound to come with heavy, long-lasting consequences. Those types might be scary, but they are also a part of what makes us into us. Trying to make the correct decision is something that we all strive for, but we're also bound to make the wrong decisions every now and then. But whether the decision was correct or not, we're always going to be running into more. Which brings us to a question that I want you to answer. Do you prefer the commitment level of Monster Hunter, where you are affected by your decisions but never fully locked into it? Or are you happier playing a game that hours after the fact gives you an existential crisis on whether going for that burger challenge was the correct choice or not? Let me know in the comments what game handled commitment on a level that you enjoyed, and if there was anything specific that made you like it. If you're still here watching, then I'd like to take this moment to thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then consider leaving a like and subscribing. If you didn't, then I have to applaud your commitment to the video, and feel free to let me know if there was anything that I could do to make the next video more enjoyable. Thank you. Have a great day.